Hello everyone and welcome to the Council of Elrond, your number one Lord of the Rings podcast, and we have a very special episode for you today as the time has finally come when we can review a new Middle-earth based feature-length movie. I'm so excited. And to do so, I'm joined as always by my brother and my co-host Dave. How are you, Dave?
Hello, I'm very good.
Nice to have you. But we are also joined today to give his expert opinion by someone who I'm sure anyone slightly interested in Tolkien will have come across at some point, as he has been providing the highest quality Middle-earth content on YouTube for a long, long time, and he has really set the bar for what it means to help people understand Tolkien's legendarium in fun and easily consumable videos. I am, of course, talking about Yoystan, the one and only from the YouTube channel Men of the West. So, Yoystan, you're very welcome to the council. So thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Yeah, super good. Thank you guys, Johnny, Dave. Thank you guys for having me. That's a high bar to live up to. I've just been doing my thing, but I really appreciate that, guys. Yeah, thank you.
I love your thing.
Yeah. We've been wanting to get you on the channel for quite a while, so it's really, really great to finally get, and it's great to have you here on such a cool episode. We're so excited to do this episode for a while. And,
it had to be a good one.
I appreciate it. And like you said, for a good on-screen Lord of the Rings adaptation, perfect, man. This is what we've been waiting for.
Crying out for. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, we are going to get now, guys. This is going to be like a review, I suppose. It's not going to be a breakdown. We're not going to go scene by scene through the whole movie. That would just take forever. So we're going to do some more kind of just general. So if I ask a question, don't be afraid to just come in at like the final scene or whatever. Also, please, careful for spoilers. Everyone listening, this is going to be a full spoiler review. So we're going to just jump in straight away. And well, Yoystan, I want to know, how are you feeling before you went to see this movie? Were you like anxious? Were you into anime, first of all? That was a big thing as well for other people. And were you kind of nervous due to what we've been getting recently, which is a lot of online hate that kind of comes before anything even airs nowadays? So what were your emotions going into this movie?
Yeah. So as far as anime, I grew up, it's not quite true anime, but I grew up watching Avatar: The Last Airbender. And that was kind of my introduction to anime adjacent type of projects. So then more recently, I've gotten into Attack on Titan and Vinland Saga and Jujutsu Kaisen. So I've kind of partially, actually, because this movie was coming out, I've taken some steps into some of the more recommended animes and loved those. Right? They're certainly different. There's a couple different types of tropes that I would say go along with anime than what we see in a lot of Western media. A lot more introspection in the characters, inner monologues, things like that. So it takes a bit of an adjustment, but when you make it, you see just how amazing these stories are and how they can be told visually in a different way, which we certainly get with this movie. So going into the movie, I was a little nervous because of the general audience scores, right? If we look at the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I mean, they all rank in the 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, right?
Yeah.
And the Hobbit trilogy is a little bit more all around the board. So I was hoping for at least something to the quality of at least the Hobbit, because the Lord of the Rings just set such a high mark. But honestly, I would say it's at least hits the mark of the Hobbit, if not between the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings in terms of quality.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I loved this movie. And I think it's one thing that modern audiences, general audiences, that I think this is going to diverge people who are pure Tolkien kind of fans and your more general audiences. I'm not sure how much just your average moviegoer who's maybe seen The Lord of the Rings once, like 10 years ago, how much they would love it. But if you are a Lord of the Rings fan, I feel like this is what we've been waiting for since 10 years ago, since at least the Battle of the Five Armies.
Sure. Yeah, completely. Yeah. Well, you've just made a comment there, which makes me know that you are far more into anime than both Dave and myself, and you know a lot more, and you're definitely more of an expert on that, because I can speak for both Dave and I when I say that our only kind of the only thing that we've just dipped our toe in anime, and that would have been just like, years and years ago as kids watching things like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and things like that. But so that's good to know that you have some sort of now we were recommended loads of stuff over the last year or so, and I remember being like, I have something on my phone with like loads of notes of I have to watch this after this. I didn't watch any of them, I'm sorry, people. I had really good
I'm just going to rewatch the original trilogy of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, exactly.
So sorry, Dave, I cut across you there.
No, I was going to say the exact same thing, that Yoystan, you're clearly more qualified, which is good to know in terms of a fan of anime, because that, for me, I loved this movie, but the big gripe I had was the anime, and my little experience I have with anime movies or animated movies in general. It seems like it hasn't been as good as some of the the literal animation in some anime movies. And maybe that was just time constraints. I'm not sure, but I don't know. I've actually seen this movie twice. And if anyone wants to check out the non-spoiler review, I don't know why you'd bother doing that. But anyways, you can check that out. And maybe my demeanor was a little lower, but I went to see it again on like the actual official opening day. And I don't know, I was like, right, I'm not in love with the way it looks, but I'm just going to ignore that and just like try and like dive into the characters and the story. And and I was trying to actually nitpick and be like, okay, what is it that I don't like? And I was like, actually, the pacing is excellent. The characters are excellent. And like the side characters, I think I said in my first review, I was like, actually, you don't even really notice much of Hama, Haleth and Captain Targ. And that's all I noticed in my second rewatch. And there were so many other little nuggets of good things, like good Tolkien things and good Peter Jackson lore things that I picked up on my second view. And yeah, I suppose that's another question. I don't want to dominate the interview here, but I just want to know.
I shall be asking the questions, Dave.
Well, I do have one thing in terms of just like, I felt like it not only adapted the story of Tolkien really well, but it actually just expanded upon Peter Jackson's lore of Middle Earth. Like, obviously, it's the same canon or it's the same IP, and I just felt like, if this is the lore, if we're looking at the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy, now we actually have another movie that can stand on its own pedestal and be like, I'm also part of this world and I should be here. And Hera, for me, now will just be in there along the likes of Tauriel, maybe, in Peter Jackson's IP. So
I would put it out there.
What do you guys think about that anyways, just in terms of like the expansion on the lore and adaptation in general?
Yeah, and I've been thinking about the anime thing as well, because some other animes that I've watched have looked better than this one. When I saw the trailers, I thought this was, certainly a different style than, you have all these different studios. And funny enough, the three animes that I've watched all the way through, at least as far as they are currently, are all MAPPA studios. So they're all the kind of along the same lines of the same sort of animation. So this one was different than those. But also, I feel like there weren't enough frames per second with the movie. It kind of like lagged a little bit. I don't know if that was part of it. That kind of was weird. And that's the thing about anime too. Can't really do this with film, but you can go through and fix it afterwards. So I'm curious if they go back and add some more frames before we get certain releases, or they come back in a couple of years and have this kind of remastered version where they do that. So that's always something they could do.
Again, with anime, because I don't know much about that world, I also at times was thinking, this seems like it's lagging a bit. Is that the style? Is that like the way it's supposed to be?
No,
it's just your old age, Johnny.
I didn't bring my glasses to that showing. So
well, it's funny because even in one of the animes that I watched, Jujutsu Kaisen, the animators were not happy with a scene that I thought looked pretty cool, so they came back after it was already like published, and they like have been working, I believe, on a certain scene that happened. They were just like, we got to add more frames, we got to clean this up after it was already released. So that is pretty interesting to me. So I'm very curious if enough of these kinds of complaints would help future, animators maybe go back and fix some of these things. But as far as it connecting to Jackson's overall universe, I certainly agree. After the movie, I was thinking a lot about The moment in the book right after the end of the Battle of Helm's Deep, and the Dunlendings all throw down their weapons in fear because they hear the horn of Helm Hammerhand sound through the deep again, and so they think the ghost has returned.
Yeah.
Right? I wish we could have seen that in Peter Jackson's two. It almost makes me wish we had a couple more scenes in the Two Towers that call back, because obviously we get Gimli blowing the horn in Peter Jackson's version, but in Tolkien's version, we don't know who blew the horn. We don't know. That could have been the ghost of Helm Hammerhand himself, or at least that's what the Dunlendings think.
Oh, so if we just cut out that scene of Gimli putting his lips to the horn, we just hear the horn and
just hear the horn after seeing this movie, and and we see just a shot of all the Dunlendings dropping their weapons and running. Yeah. Oh yeah,
that's so cool.
Gives me chills just thinking about it.
That's awesome.
I would say it just supports it. I mean, it really brings up Peter Jackson's stuff. So.
For sure. I was going to say as well also, for me, while I was watching it, there were a lot of times where I was sitting there in the cinema and I was thinking, I would be enjoying this a lot more if it were live action as opposed to it being an anime. But again, that's just me and my own personal opinion on that one specific thing. But I've also always thought of Helm as this just larger than life kind of character. And so when I heard about him being portrayed in anime, I was like, that could actually really... I just got this image of this like normal sized guy with just these giant fists for some reason, like way out of proportion. I was like, that could really work. And I have to say, I really think that translated very, very well. What were your feelings on how they translated Helm specifically? And do you think that was the good choice to have that as an anime?
People are upset that Helm wasn't the protagonist, but honestly, he did literally every single thing he does in the lore.
Yeah, sure.
To a T. He still had all the time to shine that he needed, in my opinion. Because that was one of my fears going in as well. Is it's like maybe this should be Helm's story, not Hera's. Are they going to have enough time? Yeah, they had enough time. In my mind, it's kind of like if somebody complained that Aragorn wasn't the protagonist of the Lord of the Rings movies. Technically he's not, but it's not like we don't see a lot of Aragorn, That's kind of how I see this. It's like, yeah, sure, Helm isn't technically the protagonist, but we're not at a loss of scenes for Helm. We see quite a bit of him. I think you're exactly right. He was kind of the reason that it needed to be an anime.
Especially that couple of scenes. Just that scene with the mountain troll. He jumps from like a mile high. I was like, this is anime. Here we go. And he's just like, I was gonna snap his horn off and
I was hoping a bunch of orcs. I was hoping for those like Dragon Ball Z kind of like the whole background is just like flashing yellow and he's just coming down with his fists or something. I was like,
and the sound design was so good with it. And I think that's something that anime, it kind of demands good sound design because you don't have a ton of visuals to distract you from it, or at least your brain to fill in the sound itself if it's not pronounced. But in anime, you need the punches have to land. It can't be something small. It's got to be really well made, and I think they did, especially the one that smote Freka. I was like, you could hear that from Valinor, man.
There was
absolutely. And by the way, Freka shot first as well, guys. Like, I know in the book it leads you to go like, oh, he just kind of insults Freka, and he's like, all right, I will deal with you now, Dunlending, and punches him. But Freka shot first.
And he was insulting Hera as well.
Yeah,
that's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think something else with this being an anime is, for me, this is a bit of a demo, a bit of a trial run to see if they can continue to make other animes. As time goes on, I almost feel like a live action Silmarillion wouldn't be as good as an anime Silmarillion. Because it's just too large scale. It's just too nuts.
Completely. Yeah.
Thangorodrim erupting and all that stuff, like that would almost need to be an anime. So if this is successful, I would hope to see the Silmarillion adapted in such a way.
Yeah, like as individual chapters of like this anthology where you've got maybe 45-minute episodes breaking down each kind of little story or something. Like that could be...
it'd be so cool. Like a lot of people did say initially when this was first announced, it's kind of weird. It should be Rings of Power and War of the Rohirrim reversed. Like Rings of Power should be adapted in anime and War of the Rohirrim, but we're not going to talk about Rings of Power on this episode because we're having too much fun.
Yeah, exactly. Feels good.
I also wanted to ask as well, because I didn't think of it before going into the cinema twice until afterwards. But Helm Hammerhand, I was really curious to see, does he get the name Hammerhand from after the fight with Freka, or was it like after the, stalking like a snow troll? But like, was he called Helm Hammerhand in the beginning? I think they already called him Helm Hammerhand.
I think Eowyn does as the narrator, but I didn't think any characters do.
He definitely calls himself Hammerhand.
He does? He does before.
Yeah, that's later on, is it not?
It's later on. It's not like Helm Hammerhand will kill Freka.
Right,
right. Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't talk much about this in my review of it, but the fact that this was wholly wrapped in a frame narrative given to us by Eowyn is really interesting, because anyone having a problem with Hera, Eowyn even says it. It's like, you're not going to find Hera's name in any tales or books or anything like that. She is erased from this tale.
It was quite well done, actually, when that was at the very beginning. Yeah. I was kind of like, any fears I had were kind of, kind of relieved at that point. So that was quite well done. And it was nice just to hear Miranda Otto's voice just popping up from time to time throughout the film as well. And I was just like, there she is. There is Eowyn.
Totally.
So that was really, really
I mean, that's kind of like an anime trope right there. It's just random narration just popping out at you.
Well, I'm for it.
Yeah, and we didn't get some of the other tropes that I thought we might, like a lot of the inner dialogues. So I think that would have also thrown audiences off of just like, why are we hearing Hera talk to herself constantly?
All right.
It's something that is in like a lot of animes that wasn't quite too bad in here or anything like that. So
okay. Yeah. What other big trope? I suppose like a trope of having the main character is kind of egotistical.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a trope.
It is.
Anime, right?
They call that a shonen. It's like just like the show protagonist character who's full of usually himself, young male, arrogant, powerful beyond measure.
Well, that was kind of the opposite in this. So
yeah, like
female.
She kind of got beat up a couple times.
Yeah.
But there was some arrogance, but also she's the daughter of Helm Hammerhand, so I think that's a family trait for you. She kind of overcame that by the end.
Maybe towards the end, the arrogance of her ability, because it was more almost self-confidence, where he's saying like, do you think I'm afraid of you? And she says like, you should be. So, but I'm trying to remember other moments. I've only seen it the once, so I'm trying to remember other moments of arrogance, but I don't know. I think she came across quite well.
It wasn't over. It wasn't too much. It wasn't overdone. She said like, "I'm your fastest rider," all of this kind of stuff towards the beginning. Yeah, but it wasn't too much. It really wasn't.
And again, like, that could be seen as arrogance in some ways, but then in other ways, there was no one kind of going, "What are you talking about?" Everyone else kind of going, "Yep, that's just the fact."
That's a good point. Yeah,
that whole thing of like the fastest rider. I know a lot of people are going to complain about that being like, why is suddenly she the fastest rider? But I started to think about who is the fastest rider in Rohan, and then I immediately thought of like Shadowfax is the one that's credited as the fastest horse. Like no one would say.
True.
Like no one talks about fastest riders. You should be crediting the horses. And even in this movie, they talk about is it Hamma's or Hallett's horse? Is it really slow?
Hamma's horse,
Hamma's horse is really slow, but they don't say Hamma's the slowest. I'm like, well, if Hera's on a different horse, like, just credit the horse. The horse has a name.
Something that just came to me there as well is, do you remember in like behind the scenes from the original Lord of the Rings trilogy that especially in the third movie, most of the extras that they got to ride in the battle at the Pelennor Fields, mostly of them were female, because all of the actors they were getting. So they were all wearing like, kind of like a Monty Python thing with all like fake beards and stuff, potentially men. But it's because in reality, most people that ride horses, there's probably a higher percentage of female horse riders to male horse riders. So it could make sense in the real world for a woman to be a faster rider as well. So
and I mean, something I kind of forgot to analyze this before my video yesterday, but there's just so many good details from the movie. I almost wonder if Hera's horse was one of the Maras.
Ooh.
Could be. Yeah, it was a white horse, right?
Yeah, white horse and super fast. And
she did name it, and I tried to pick up on the name on my second watch, but I couldn't Couldn't really hear it. It wasn't Asphalov, but I think it began with an A. And
interesting.
yeah, I'm not. I couldn't tell you now.
Third
what it
watch
is. And I was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So about 15 minutes into the movie, I had a big smile on my face because I had just watched the movie play out almost like beat for beat, exactly the same as the story in the book, and almost word for word at some points as well. And so I just wanted to ask, like, each of you, did you both, like me, were you just like big smile on your face, kind of going, here we go, I'm getting this like lore accurate film just play out in front of me that I've like thought about so many times in my own head, and now I'm just like, this is it, it's here. And also the voice of Brian Cox as well, like just to top it off, cherry on top.
So good.
Dave, I'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, I think, again, I have to revert back to my second watch, because I could just sit there and enjoy the story and not like worry and wonder about what's going to happen, or, you know, if the end is going to be bad, or, you know, but like, I definitely I loved it. I thought it was brilliant, and seeing a lot of the exact same lines, and the only lines that they added, I think, again, expanded and helped. Like, I loved the little politics about the fact that there's a Gondorian princeling that could be marrying Hera. I was like, that's really interesting. And you kind of think about the dynamics between Gondor and Rohan, because I was
agreeing with Freka. I was like, for Rohan.
I was like, exactly. I was like, I suppose, like, Freka mentions like Gondor will, you know, we don't want Rohan to become Gondor's lapdog, and it'll, they want to usurp Rohan. And I was like, yeah, I suppose it kind of makes sense. But what does Helm have to think about? And like, so interesting, the little politics and dynamics. I thought it felt very Game of Thrones-esque. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative to some people. But well,
like the plotting and the conniving, I suppose, of Game of Thrones.
The plotting and the conniving, so maybe like House of Dragon season 1 as well. And I love when Helm as well, when he, you know, after he commits murder and he's just like, save your breath, boy, lest it be your last. You know, he says this to Wolf when he's down on the ground. I thought everything just gave so much more, it just made so much more sense. Like, I'm not saying Tolkien didn't make sense, but Tolkien just like writes down, you know, the history, and he's like, this is what happened. And I think they filled it in really well. It gives Wolf a really good arc, or, you know, a backstory to be like, oh, I really hate you, this is why. And, you know, he was childhood friends with Hera. I think that's kind of weird that the Dunlendings are, you know, the men of wherever Wolf is from, they'd be hanging out with, you know, the High Lords and stuff. But still, I think that backstory that they were childhood friends is really interesting, and it definitely adds more to the reason that he wants to be so vengeful.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, like the first watch, because I've only watched it once so far, just nervous, right? I'm nervous. Do they get everything right? And so I'm really trying to hyper analyze everything. But yeah, when I started to see how well they were doing Helm Hammerhand, it's like, okay, I can relax. Like, this is a good movie. This is a good movie because it really hinged on how do they do this character that's already a fan favorite walking into this movie. You're right. Even from the little bits that people know about him from even if it's Shadow of War or, you know, something else where they kind of take and change his story, people love this character walking in. And so, yeah, I think when I kind of was solidified of, okay, they're getting him right, is when he not only killed Freka, but banished Wolf afterwards. And I was like, that was part of it. That was a big part. It's not just Wolf was angry, but he was banished. And it's like, if you ever come back here, you and all your people are going to die. And that is kind of what really kicks off the war and makes it partially Helm Hammerhand's fault. And so I love that they threw that in there because, it wasn't just the death, but it was that edict as well. And like you said, the Gondorian merging and the alliance there, because we know Theoden is the son of a Gondorian woman, I believe, right? Morwen Steelsheen, I believe, is Theoden's mother's name, something like that. And so we know that they have these alliances and that they do, have these different marriages. And so that is perfect. I do wish that it was a tiny thing, because most of the lore was insanely accurate. But with Gondor, why don't we call Gondor for aid? And Helm says more or less like, we don't need them, or they're not going to come. They should have said the real reason in the lore was that they were fighting Corsairs at the same time.
They were
They're
busy.
they were busy,
Yeah.
man. So I wish they had added that in, because then it would have made it seem a little less arrogant, a little less Helm's fault, and more like,
Yeah.
there's other stuff going on in the world right now that we are just hearing about.
Yeah, true. I
Yeah.
suppose you kind of wonder, Tolkien knows this, but does Helm know that they were super busy?
True. Yeah, I guess that's fair.
Well, speaking on these scenes as well, there was another little gripe that I had about the whole, like, I loved the marriage or the possible marriage to a Gondorian and all this kind of stuff. But one thing that really took me out is the fact that Hera seemingly is saying that, she would rather not be her choice, that she would rather not marry a Gondorian or Wolf or anyone for that matter. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, surely she knows the custom of Rohan or whatever's going on. I'm like, like Rohan's royal marriages, are they not arranged? And is she just hearing this for the first time? Like, I assume it's similar to like medieval times or Game of Thrones type situations where you marry for power, to join families or houses, this kind of stuff. But like,
and
she's just like, no, I'd rather not marry anyone. I'm like, you don't get to make this choice. I know it's kind of it seemed a little bit too like modern movie.
Well,
for
modern
me,
audiences, I suppose. They're kind of that's a really good point. But I kind of wanted just to go back for 1 second as well to the other thing that that you were saying about how Freka was saying, that Rohan, it could be seen as Gondor's like lapdog, or that they will
usurp
will usurp us. And I mean, that was something that I really kind of opened my eyes to thinking. I've always thought of Rohan as just kind of like, the kind of the little brother to Gondor, like, they're just like leveled down. But why would the people from Rohan have that feeling? Like, they could also be thinking, or they could always think, one day we'll be mightier than Gondor, and why would they not be, competitive against Gondor as well?
Two separate kingdoms,
really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, Gondor wouldn't exist without Rohan, right? The Battle of the Field of Celebrant, when Eorl came down and saved Gondor, they wouldn't exist without Rohan. So there has to be a little bit of pride there for sure.
Yeah.
Now Gondor might see them as a bit of a puppet state to some, depending on the steward, most likely, right? Because they were just like, here's this huge swath of land, Rohan. It's more just, so you can defend our northern flank. We don't really care. That's a little bit of what it seems like. Here's a big reward, but also you're going to defend our north. So that's really a win for us.
It was clever. It was.
It was.
So I wanted to ask, were you satisfied with the way that Helm's story was told and him as a character? I'm just going to say it. I mean, you mentioned already before that you think, that you said that they gave us his entire story. Everything that he does in the book is shown and is played out on screen. And I accept that. I completely agree with that. Me personally, at the end of it, I was still kind of going, I could have done with a little bit more help. Like, just, I mean, they were able to flesh out the story. I know, I'm sorry. They were able to flesh out and kind of invent other things for other people and invent loads of things for Hera. You could invent another little side quest for Helm where he's out like doing a bit more murdering and pretending to be a ghoul and a wraith, So I mean, I don't know. I've always been, really, really into and like obsessed with the idea of Helm just out stalking, as Dave, you mentioned earlier, as an ice troll, as they mentioned in the book. And it's just I would have liked a little bit more of that, but I mean, maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I could see that. Another scene where he almost even takes on like the horn of the troll that he slew, and maybe even like the fur carcass or something as a cloak. Because I think I've seen some art that people have made of almost that, where he's wearing this like white fur cloak and he looks kind of like a frost troll or some sort, right? And he's out there doing his I would have been down for that for sure. But I mean, I can't really complain, because everything that is mentioned in that appendix it's all there. It's all there.
Yeah. I mean, one big difference. Well, it's not a big difference, but like the death of his sons, where one is slain at the gates, or basically at the Hornburg, and the other one, I always forget if it's Hammer or Haleth, but one of them
gets the arrow through the neck.
Yeah, but the one that takes like a sortie while they're basically surrounded in the Hornburg, and he basically takes the sortie and he goes out into the snow.
Sorry. I thought you were talking about in the movie.
No. In the book, it just says like, and he's never
I think
seen
that was
again.
Haleth. I think that was Haleth.
Yeah.
Something
True.
along that line. So like at this point in the movie, Helm is already like mortally wounded, and he's just about able to stand up and see his last son be executed. But maybe if there was a longer gap where Helm kind of recovers a little bit, he's still completely distraught. He's in the Hornburg and he's, trying to figure out plans tactically. And then like his son is like, look, Dad, I'm going to head out. I'm going to fight off. And he's like, no. And he's even more heartbroken. And then he doesn't come back. That would have given us a lot more scenes.
That's true.
But,
and,
but like, I still love the way they did it. I thought it was, by the way, it's a PG movie and we just see, I don't know what you call it in America, but like for us, that's like parental guidance. You can be any age and you can go see this movie and you just see Haleth or Hama or whichever, just
yeah.
Obviously, they don't
gruesome.
show exactly the size, but they just basically pull up just slightly above his head and show and it's like
I wonder if
from Wolf.
It was, and I like that it broke his spirit and not his body, because then the next part makes sense where he just becomes this ghost of vengeance and has his final like reuniting with Hera. But I could see that as well. Spreading out those deaths could have made more of an impact on audiences.
Sure.
It almost brings me back to The Hobbit, where I think who's the first one to die? Fili, and then Keely's not soon after, and then Thorin, and it kind of all happens within about 30 minutes of each other. And that's like brutal. So I wonder if they kind of speed that along just to not keep audiences too depressed for too long. They're like, all right, we have some deaths we got to cover. So like, we'll knock these out so we can get back to not being sad.
I suppose I always immediately forget like what goes on in that last Hobbit movie, especially.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think, would it be better if they just adapted it the way it actually happened in Bilbo's head, where he just wakes up and they're all dead, and he's just like, I suppose a war happened, and now we're going to Thorin's funeral.
Yeah. No, they like the big cinematics, right? I mean, speaking of like the Muma kill and that we see, and the Watcher in the Water that we got or whatever. I feel like those things that we saw in this were also very much anime. Right, it would have been really tough to shoot a Watcher grabbing and eating a Mumuk in like live action.
How do you even film that? Do you
Or
just
a
stand in
CGI
front of a giant green screen and
go?
Whoa, exactly.
Come on, guys, work your magic.
a little less eating, more tentacles.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like there would have been a ton of CGI anyway. So the fact that it is anime, it does blend it really well together, I think.
They may have decided, guys, let's not have the Watcher in the Water eating a mumuk if we have for live action, which is something I wanted to ask as well. That was something that, as I was coming into, like, now those scenes did kind of happen relatively quickly, and I was worried about them really slowing down the pacing and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't too bad in the final thing. But I was worried about having these kind of like little side quests with like eagles and mumicles and the Watch in the Water, and I was just worrying about them taking away from the story that we were seeing. And do you think that may have that time that we were there, it could have been better served if we had been able to develop some of the side characters a little bit more, got to see a little bit more of maybe the character of Haleth? We got that one scene of Hama where he's playing the lute, and he has that little conversation with his sister. We don't get it's called a lute, isn't it? I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, no, you're right, I think.
Oh, okay. My medieval musical instruments. Yeah, try to remember them all. But just, I would have liked to see the character of Haleth a little bit more. I think that they did like Frealaf was really, he was so cool. We got that little scene with Hama. We didn't get too much Haleth, so I think that could have been developed a little bit more.
I think even having them on that adventure too would have been cool to see them. Because Frealaf was there, which allowed him to get kicked out because he allowed Hera to get captured. But to see her brothers a bit more, I would have liked that too. I know that's one complaint from general reviewers that I've heard, is that the movie was too long. Which, from a Tolkien perspective, I'm like, no, that was perfect. That was like perfect length, if not actually a little short.
I've never understood that complaint for people.
An hour and a half short,
Exactly.
The extended editions are way too short for me.
Yeah, totally. So I don't know. I would have loved to see a little bit more character development and a little bit more of actually character development for Hera as well.
Sure.
Because right, like you guys were saying, the marriage customs and all of these things. Why was she so averse to not, she did not want to do these things? I would have been interested to learn, why was she so adventurous? Why was she kind of rebellious against her own customs and norms? And at the end, why would she leave Rohan? Because she does have an arc, but I will say it's a smaller arc than what might have been with a few more of those scenes. I suppose her arc was just learning to trust herself and learning that like her leadership counted enough. But I was asking myself that question after the movie was, Helm's arc was almost this fall from grace, this fall from arrogance, to where he learned pretty much the important thing is putting family first and over your own pride, your own ego, and being able to pull back where you need to, right? He realized that it was in large part his ego that caused this war.
Sure.
And so he has
self-sacrifice
this arc.
At the end. Yeah.
Exactly. But Hera, she doesn't have such a pronounced arc. She does have one, I think, of learning to trust herself and so forth. But I don't know. I would have liked to see more setup on the foundation part of that, just so we could get more of a payoff with her arc.
Yeah. Let's just speak about Hera for a moment as well. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it is kind of the difficult question that's been coming up a lot. And the whole girl boss thing that's been kind of stamped onto Hera. And I've seen loads of people reviewing this film before it was even released and kind of saying like, she's just a girl boss. Basically from what we've seen in the trailer. What's your take on that? And just for any listeners, what is a girl boss? It's like, basically it's now the kind of typical strong, independent female that's pushed to the front of the movie, and they're just able to do anything. They don't really face any adversity really, because they just have all the abilities already like stored away from the very beginning. They don't actually show them learning them. Like, for example, people are saying, okay, she's just the fastest rider, she's an accomplished climber, she can do everything, like there's no real struggle. Do you agree with that, or do you think that that's kind of a silly argument?
She is as much a girl boss as Helm is a guy boss. Like, you
can't sit, girl.
You can't sit here and say on one hand, the fact that Hera climbs a mountain, that's unacceptable. But Helm jumping like a mile off of a cliff onto a frost troll and kicking its butt, right, and using his ginormous lats to open a gate frosted over by himself. Like, you can't sit here on one hand and be like, that's all perfectly fine. But Hera, being able to fight, no, that's too far.
Yeah, Helm had a personal trainer though, so I made up for that.
You can see in his muscles he was hench. He went to the gym every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Tuesday's arms are back.
It's too bad that this movie's been stamped with that, because it's truly not. And like, I don't know how many in the Lord of the Rings movies, even including The Hobbit, what real female protagonists, heroes do we see? We see kind of Arwen, a little bit of Arwen. We see Éowyn, Galadriel a bit in the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies. And then we see Tauriel, and that's it. Like, that's it for 6 movies. But we have so many great male characters. So I'm not sure what everybody's deal is with, why can't we have like a really heroic female character, especially in Rohan, where it does make sense, and the Shield Maidens are this renowned group, right? If they were, I do wish we did get a bit more about who the Shield Maidens were, because they almost treated them as a sub-faction. Completely. I would have liked to hear more about where they arose in the history of Rohan. Were they from a particular place? Were they from all over? Something, more about that. But she was
what it takes to become a Shield Maiden as well. Why do you just like kind of identify as a Shield Maiden? Because that seems pretty cool too. Like,
I'm not sure if you guys had the same thing, but when they spoke at the beginning of like, I actually think we're gonna retire that banner, we're gonna take that one down. Yeah. I was like, I guarantee at the end of the movie, there's gonna be like Shield Maidens popping up all over the place. Like, I'm secretly a Shield Maiden, and they were gonna come in and save the day. And I was like, that could be pretty cool. But it didn't play out that way. Yes. But, I was definitely like, we're gonna get a lot more Shield Maiden stuff. But I mean, we did get to see Hera eventually killing Wolf with a shield, and I was like, that's gotta be some sort of
that's true too. Shield Maiden,
yeah. So.
I mean, the symbol of her kind of killing him by protecting Rohan, right? Because that's what a shield symbolizes. Is cool. Yeah. By killing him, it was out of protection of Rohan. It wasn't out of vengeance for herself. Right. Yeah. But yeah, no, she has moments where she fails, or she has to come to terms with what is versus what she wants to be, and this all goes against this idea of a Mary Sue. I mean, we see her get beaten up a couple times, kidnapped. Like, she's not just winning every single battle she's in. She loses about half her battles. So
Yeah,
I'm
that's a
like,
good point.
yeah, she is a well-developed character. She deserves her place there. And again, we've got so many awesome male characters. Why I don't get why we couldn't have an awesome female character here.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, I suppose
Yeah.
when they put Arwen in the first Lord of the Rings movie, and she was the one that took Frodo to Rivendell, and people were complaining about that and saying like, oh, they're changing the lore. In this one, at least, this is like an untouched daughter of Helm that they were like, okay, we can just develop her into whatever we want to be, and we're not changing any lore, so you can't get angry about that. I mean, it's
adding to it.
Yeah, it's an open book really there, so they can't do any wrong.
Yeah. And I know I shouldn't, I'm sorry guys, but today I had a little fight with someone on Twitter, or not a fight, but like a disagreement of words where someone was, just shouting from the rooftops the whole girl boss thing. And I was like, oh, but like, why? And he was like, I assume this person on X was like, you can't, like, just messing up the lore and changing everything. And I was like, what actually has changed? Like, what part? And they said like, oh, Helm's story it should be Helm. And I was like, but what did they change from Helm? And I listed all the things. I said, we have his, first the marriage scene or the proposal scene, then his fight with Freka, and then the death of his sons, and then he's stalking like Snow Troll, and then he dies with knees unbent. I'm like, what did they change? And then I can't remember his response, but it was pretty funny. Where it's just like, you should still be the main character. I was like, well, if that's your issue, then that's fine. But like, I'm okay with this. It is a movie. It's an adaptation, and if I was to compare it to even a lot of other Peter Jackson's adaptations, I would say this probably holds true to the lore, or at least the heart of the story 10 times more, because like all the characters are there. One character is just made more important.
I might agree with what that guy's saying, that like, okay, Helm, in my opinion, I wanted him to be the main character of this story, but I'm not going to then kind of go, oh, well, it's because of a girl boss. I mean, that's got nothing to do with it. It wasn't. But just because maybe she replaced the protagonist in this situation doesn't mean that I should basically immediately just say this is a terrible character. She's not well developed. It's just whatever, a Mary Sue. That's not the case, and that's what I was worried about the most, really. And I'm glad to say that is not what happened.
It is a strange thing to say. I mean, Helm being the protagonist, because that's originally what I wanted as well. Just because he's such a shoe-in, awesome character, to where it should be his story more or less. But the narrative issue that we would have to face with him being the protagonist is he dies in his own story before the end of the war. Right, he dies before Wolf does in the lore, so we would have to deal with that of a dead protagonist issue. Because honestly, because of that, in just a narrative and how do we build this movie sort of sense, it would have to be Frealaf to be the protagonist, if not Hera, most likely, because he is the one.
That's a good point.
If anyone listening looks up Lord of the Rings Online Wolf Frealaf, there's this tapestry in the Lord of the Rings Online game of Wolf killing Frealaf. And it's like in front of the Hall of Meadowseld, looks awesome. But, I think how he went down in the movie is actually kind of more cinematic, and it was more heartfelt because of how the story was built up. So it would have had to have been him, but I don't necessarily think that would be more satisfying because, again, it's still not Helm, because Helm dies halfway through his own story, or at least three quarters of the way through his own story.
Yeah. And Frealaf as well, he could... But they would have to change a lot as well, because he's gone for a lot of the story of the book. So like they were just like, right, we need some consistent character who doesn't die, so that rules out Helm, Hammer, Haleth, and they probably were just like, okay, who's a character that's like, close to the royals and survives the whole way through the film? Let's just go through that character's eyes, and like, I think with a refreshed mindset and the fact that the movie isn't bad, I can actually honestly go back and say I think that's how they came to the choice of picking Hera as the protagonist for the story, and I think it works out. I think people just have been so hurt from some recent adaptions, we won't mention them by name, that they're like, oh, we're just getting like fed this this crap from corporate, and I hate it, and girl boss this and girl boss that. But no, I think it's the most reasonable solution.
So for
is.
our listeners back home, do we all agree that it was probably a good decision in the end to make Hera the protagonist and the lead in this film?
Yeah. I would say so. I mean, we see Éowyn as a shield maiden in The Lord of the Rings, but she's one of a few characters of that level. She's not the protagonist, right? So to actually see shield maiden be the protagonist in a Rohan story while still getting Helm Hammerhand being super awesome.
Yeah.
It doesn't detract. It adds to it, honestly. And
yeah,
I mean, if I eventually have a daughter, like I'll want her to see this movie and
she
be
shall
like
be called
inspired
Hera.
by. Yeah, exactly.
I will call her Helm Hammerhand. No, I disagree. I think she's a girl boss, Mary Sue. I hate this trash woke crap. Yeah. No. I think it was good. I was going to say something about Frealaf. Oh, yeah. Just when we were talking about Frealaf, another thing. I'm struggling to remember, but I was kind of thrown off both times when I saw this in the movie. How Helm actually sends Frealaf away, and he's like, "You're no kin of mine." Like, do you guys remember? Like that doesn't happen, right? In the book, I think he's Frealaf just leaves, and I suppose that kind of adds to the feeling of guilt that Helm Hammerhand probably has about the detriment, or what he's done to the detriment of Rohan. So again, another good choice, but it was a bit of a shock to me.
That also added to the character of Frealaf, I believe, because in that moment he was so gracious, where Helm was completely, unhinged, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And Frealaf was like, "You
idiot!"
Yeah, Hera was like, "If it wasn't for him, I'd be dead." Like, he came and saved me, and he's like, "You're out of here. You're gone. I'm gonna." What do you send him to do? To go and dig some pits
trench
or something, some
trenches.
Yeah,
and then Frealaf was just like, "Okay, I accept your decision, and you will always have my sword." And I was like, "Oh my god!"
No, what happens is Frealaf offers his sword, and he's like, blah blah blah, and he's like, I would not need your sword. You're no kin of mine. And then he says, "You will always have my sword, uncle, whether you value it or not."
Yeah,
because
I know, that was so nice.
Theoden or Helm says like, I do not value your sword, and
also
that
in
really,
that moment where Helm sends him away, it also gives a little insight into the kind of the mindset of the warriors of the Rohirrim, where he was saying, "Look, we're going to go out into battle, and all of the people that fight valiantly in that battle, their names will be sung in the songs for hundreds of years to come, and your name will be left out." And it's like, that's all that these warriors and these soldiers, that's all that they want. They want to go out and die on the battlefield and have a hero's death, and just have songs sung about them. So just like that one little scene had so much in it that was like, it was so impactful.
So good. And like the fact that Frealaf, this is building up to the fact that he is going to become king of Rohan. He's going to become the 10th king of Rohan, which is cool, because obviously and like this is Theoden's great whatever, like 7 times back, his great grandfather. So you really do get to see his dignified approach to even being banished by the king, and he comes back obviously to save Rohan when it's in its need, and the king is actually dead. And he's very handsome when he's being crowned. I just wanted to add that
in. And that's where the visual storytelling is interesting too. My dad was saying it's kind of weird that he had black hair, because he's a man of Rohan. And so I was thinking about that. I'm like, well, actually, based on where he was, he might have had Gondorian blood in him too.
Oh, that's so cool.
Isn't that interesting? I was like, no, I don't think that was a mistake at all. That might have actually been intentional because of that, right? Don Harrow makes sense to have some Gondorian blood.
But it was mousy brown hair. It was kind of like Theoden's color hair as well.
True. True. And I don't know, this idea that, again, the girl boss or whatever, but there's so much for male viewers to see and take away from this as well. I mean, I'm not a father, but I imagine I'm going to make a couple mistakes as a father at some point in my life, and Theoden does, and Theoden makes mistake, or not Theoden, sorry, Helm does.
There's so many cool kings of Rohan now.
That's right. But he makes a mistake, and he yells at his nephew, and he does all this with his sons, gets them killed, but he doesn't give up. He goes out and he still fights off forever and fights for as long as he can in remembrance of them. But there's still that tinge of regret that fosters change in his character. almost Kratos God of War style, right? Where he's just like, man, I've made some mistakes.
Great
as a
comparison.
father. Yeah, and it started with that violence at the beginning, where he was too strong for his own good, and then he has this journey of, I need to use the strength for the right reasons while I still can. And so I don't know. There's just so much that even men can take away from this that I think really resonates and hits home. And then again, as Frealaf to also be a dutiful nephew, because he takes up the armor of the man who the last time he saw told him to go die in a ditch. But he still took up that armor. He still honored his legacy of his uncle because he knew that those words were just words, right? The love carried through, the honor and the duty to his sire and his uncle and his family carried through. So I think there's still so many great things to take away from the film in that regard. And that's what makes the Rohirrim different than the Dunlendings, is when Wolf surrendered, quote unquote, that Hera didn't just stab him in the face or something, like she tried to give him mercy multiple times and he still didn't accept it. And that is the difference between the Rohirrim and the Dunlendings, is one accepted honor and one did not, at least at the end there.
You're hyping me up now. I want to go back and watch it again.
Absolutely, man. I'm telling you.
Is there a really late showing that I can go watch right now?
No, it definitely warrants another watch. For anyone that's listening that's watched it just the once, go back and try and watch it in the theaters again. Or wait until it comes out. But try and support the movie, because if we want more adaptations or adaptations, whatever you call it, this is the way. You gotta support the movie and spread word of mouth and all that kind of stuff. I just want to say on Frealaf as well, because obviously we talked about how like super wise and I love how he counsels the king and everything, but like he had some fairly gruesome kills in this movie which were cool as well. Like when he's rescuing Hera, he like chops off someone's hand, then stabs someone. I think like it's
pretty brutal.
He stabs someone right in the belly, and then he like shoots someone in the head with an arrow. But actually, with that whole like kind of plan that Frealaf is basically going to be the archer to protect the people escaping, that was one of the small gripes I had with the movie, was the writing. Now I think the writing was brilliant, but just some of the dialogue, I felt it was very movie trope, maybe not anime trope, but that whole thing of, I have a plan. This is your plan? Who said it was a good plan or something? And then the two people reverse the line again later at the end of the movie, and I was like, I just don't didn't say it was a good one. It just felt like kids Cartoon Network kind of.
It was well, I can't remember the character's name again, but the handmaiden.
Olwen, I think it was.
Olwen.
Olwen.
Yeah,
that's fair. There are a couple moments. I never was sold on Hera saying, you should be right. You should be afraid of it. I was never sold on that. Also, I will say that. It
was in the trailer as well, I think.
It was.
It kind
was.
of
But the
gave
Bride
off
of Death.
The bride. Yeah, sorry. I was going to just say it kind of gave off vibes of that.
Good.
Sorry, didn't think I was going to bring this at all. But in Rings of Power, where there was like that was it the final episode where there was like the standoff between Galadriel and Sauron. And she was just like, what did she say? She was just like,
heal yourself, something like that.
Because in my head now, she basically just says like "F you."
Season 1 also had something where the stranger said, "I'm good," right? I'm good. You just have a couple moments of like, what? Who passed this? Who wrote this? But I mean, I would say Hera doing that Bride of Death thing. Maybe we needed more building there, because that was strange.
I did want to ask a question on that. Like, what was there some symbolism that I missed that? She just suddenly was like, I'm going to,
Rohan,
would be a kick-ass outfit for this final battle scene? Me in a wedding dress.
No, that whole thing, I think the reason that she wore the wedding dress was because she's basically... Well, actually, no, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I thought it was to do with the fact that
angry?
Wolf wanted her as his bride, and... No, wait, maybe I'm missing this.
No, that's
right. It's a weird motivation, I think.
It was strange.
Like, I can't comment too much on, again, if we get after her for wearing a wedding dress in battle, like, I have to get after Helm for wearing a tank top in freezing cold weathers. But
that was
but I will
Guy
say,
Boss.
Guy Boss, that's right. I think if she had, I don't know if it had been armor instead from this almost the first shield, one of the first shield maidens of Rohan that she had tailored to herself, and then she said, "I'm not your bride. I am the bride of Rohan," or something like, "I am Rohan's bride, not Death's bride, but like pretty much she's married to her people, and that is why she stands." Like I think that would have been a better change than Death, but apply it to just the country. You are Rohan's bride, right? I think that would have been better than just simply Death, especially because she wasn't actually trying to kill him anyway.
Yeah.
So,
I'm a bride of hurting you.
Yeah. Exactly.
One question as well, guys. Yeah, the bride of disarming. One thing that I actually haven't seen anyone talk about, and I keep forgetting to bring it up, but I want to write this down because it's really irked me since I saw the trailer. So, have you guys noticed that the Hornburg looks different? And I don't like it looks brilliant, but I even noticed this in the trailers as well. It's the exact same, but it's like much higher. Like the ramp and the gate is like the ramp is much longer. And then the sewer drain is higher up on the deeping wall.
Sewer drain, yeah.
So I remember seeing that in the trailers.
That maybe it's because the ground level has risen since then,
but that's what I was thinking.
Sense. I mean, it was never.
I was thinking like during the long winter there was going to be like some sort of avalanche that like wiped away a lot of the Dunlendings. This is what I imagined before the movie came out, and like it just changes the ground level of the entire fortress. But we didn't get that. But I feel like there is an explanation. But
we also know that the movie was like 20 or 30 minutes longer that they had to cut. So,
really? I did not know this.
Oh, yeah. I where did I hear that? So there was a lot. There was a lot. Yeah, there's going to be an extended edition, surely.
Yeah, there will be. Holy crap!
So I'm pretty sure that it was way too long, and they were like, okay. So like their reduced time was this like 2 hours.
Okay.
Plus whatever it was.
Interesting.
So that gives me hope, because that was something I noticed like immediately. I was like, oh, look at the sewer drain thing from the deeping wall. It's way higher. Like, what's going on there? And it makes
nerds.
Helm's Deep.
That's not the typical drainage of Helm's Deep.
It's funny, I didn't notice that, but now I'm looking at a picture of it. Yeah, that thing is way up towards the top. What?
Oh yeah. Oh, I noticed it immediately, and I was like, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't want to like tell other, like have this conversation with other content creators, because I want to see it happen in the movie, whatever happens. And then it didn't happen, so I was like, what's going on? But by the way, on that, the siege engine, what do you think of that idea, the whole siege engine, both of you guys?
I'm glad again. This is another thing that was good that it was anime, because in reality, I don't think that would have worked.
The physics don't work, but it was
like dropping. Yeah, it was cool again, but just like dropping this giant, like shoddily built wooden bridge onto a stone wall. It would have just snapped in half the second it made contact, I think. But
absolutely.
And wasn't the guy, the drummer, was he on top while it was? They were like, okay, you're gonna die.
So cool.
Yeah.
And he did. They showed him like physically getting launched, and he was just like, It kind of reminded me of like, the goblins. It was kind of like the goblins in the book, how they like to develop their own like unique siege engines, like randomly built for war. So I really liked how they didn't go down the same route of ladders and stuff. It was a very interesting take, but
I liked it because it kind of was reminiscent of those ladders, but it also is important that they never breached the wall, right? Because that's what Theoden says. They've never breached the wall.
Yeah, of course.
So it just kind of went over it and then ran back over it in fear.
They actually did a single person.
Yeah, no, some people did get over it, but like not many at all. Yeah. But I thought when they started building them, I thought they were going to be like those towers that the trolls push towards the siege towers from the Return of the King movie. So that's what I was expecting to see. But then when it was just like way taller than the wall and it just kind of crashed down, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But again, I mean, visually it worked in the cartoon structure. Like so,
I remember as well after my first watch, seeing scenes like the Watcher in the Water eating the Mumikil, and I was kind of like, what's going on there now? Like for the Watcher in the Water that I saw in the Fellowship definitely couldn't fit his mouth around one of those giant Mumaks in the third Peter Jackson movie, but I did see like Weta Workshop put out a thing because they thought about all this. They have an answer for everything. So these actually aren't like the Mumakil that we see in the third movie. They're like a subspecies. They're much smaller. It's like a weird hybrid. So they actually are smaller. So they've designed, like Weta Workshop have designed a cool Mumakil. So I thought that was cool. And I actually, again, like after seeing it for the first time, I was like, that's another gripe I had. But then going into the second time, I'm like, they have an answer for it. It's brilliant. I love this. They've thought about every detail.
That's really
that
cool.
does help because one problem I had is that in the book, it's the Easterlings that are coming into Rohan's eastern side, but the Easterlings don't have Mumakil. That's the Haradrim that have it. So I wondered about that. They even say in the movie it's the Varags or Variegs, and those are the same kinds of Easterlings that were at the Battle of the Field of Celebrance when Gondor almost got like folded. But it's those types of Easterlings. I was like, I don't think they have Mumakil.
Didn't they call
so
them
I don't know why.
though?
Oh, interesting. So maybe it is just a mixture.
In the movie,
both.
I believe they said,
they
said Southern, yeah.
Southern, interesting.
But they did have the design of the Haradrim. So like it's just all because we're so locked into the world. We're like, they look the exact same as the Haradrim warriors from Peter Jackson. So again,
How gross
also,
was
like,
that Mumakil though? That when they were the beach was red. I was like, this is so. What is going on?
By the way, the Mumakil. Did you guys pick up on the fact that Hera has clearly heard the poem, Sam's poem? What is it they say? Like big as a mouse, or what does it say? It makes the earth shake. Was the line?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
I was like, that is so cool.
And it makes sense that it must have been from the Eotheid that poem came from because they knew of the hobbits, right? The whole Bitla. So that it makes sense there's that cross culture. Yeah.
I loved that. Like, I got so excited when that line came up, and I was like grabbing my girlfriend's arm. I was like, and then I was like, she doesn't know what's going on.
She was just like asleep, like
You're
like, she knows Sam's poem.
The poem.
And she was like, okay, that's nice, dear.
Even as well when Hera, when she blew into the Beastmaster's horn, it sounded exactly like the Haradrim horn, which I've performed many times on this podcast. Where I was like, but it sounded very similar to that, and I was like, this is cool. This is locks me in.
Dave and I love a good horn. We love the sound of a horn on this channel. And speaking of horns as well, I wanted to kind of there's something I've always loved about the similar. Again, listeners of our channel will know that my favorite character in all Lord of the Rings is the character of Boromir, and I love just the way that Helm in this and just in his story as well, when he goes out on his like nightly witch hunts, he blows his horn to like kind of put the fear of God into
terrifying.
Not like a thief in the night.
Exactly, and it's like the way Boromir as well when they're setting out in the Ringo South chapter when they're setting forth, and he blasts his horn, and Elrond's like, Boromir, don't do that again until you're on the boundary or the border of your country. And he's like, I will not go forth like a thief in the night. I've always blasted my horn. I'm like, I love it. Just those similarities.
It's so good, especially within the geography of Helm's Deep, because it ricochets off of all the stone walls and everything. And then they couldn't.
They don't know where it's
coming
from.
It's awesome. It's so
and you really felt that in this movie. It was just like a really low horn when Helm was going out stalking his prey, and the look of terror in the Dunlendings, like it was
they did that
really well done.
They did that.
It was very very good. So
I was very.
I love that.
Were they when they were in Isengard? I'm thinking about it because the deep parts of the lore, such as that the Ring of Isengard was not repaired because Saruman hadn't come there yet, and I think he had to repair it after he got there. The fact that was in ruins was really interesting because that is in the lore, I'm pretty sure. But were they inside of the tower? I've just been thinking about that too. Were they inside of the Tower of Orthanc when she was captured, when she had to jump out?
I don't think so. I think that was
just a building, right?
That was some scaffolding or something. You're just like, perfect. Okay.
I was like, I had to make sure.
Lines up.
That key was not with them. Yeah.
Well, now that you say it, like they did have to ride a good bit before getting out of the gate of that area. But I think it was just a building inside. Now we'll have to go for our seconds and thirds and fourth watches
right.
to establish this. But actually, did you say, I don't know if you said rubble or rabble there, but I wrote down a note here when Frealaf says, "This is no rabble of wildmen." It was very similar to when Gimli says, of mindless orcs. And I was like, a couple of nice, even just the way they speak, I'm like, it's just very Peter Jackson Tolkienian, if it were. Yeah. Any other cool Easter eggs, you guys?
Sorry, just to cut in, because we are going to finish this up pretty soon. But I do want to touch on one other important aspect, which is the we've already spoken about the sound design and how it was beautiful and really, really fantastic, which I suppose is an important part of anime, as you mentioned before, Yoystan. But the music as well is such an important, such an integral part of, well, for me, any movie really, but especially anybody that's grown up with Lord of the Rings. We're just so accustomed to just this incredibly high quality musical score that's just flowing through in the background, that kind of like sort of teases you into the world of Middle Earth and just makes you really feel like you're back at home again. And do you think that you got that from this? Just to give, like, so that where I'm coming from, I felt I got that from this, and I feel like just Howard Shore's score was kind of just like blended in. And so we definitely got those kind of like hints of the old score, but we also got a lot of individual character of a new score as well, and the new melodies and the new motifs that kind of came in as well. So what were your opinions on the music in general in this? Dave, I'll come to you on that.
Yeah, like obviously Howard Shore's music is the GOAT, the GOAT. And I think just kind of like what this movie did with the original trilogy, I just feel like it added to what needed to be added, and it left alone what was already there, and it just accentuated what Howard Shore had already written. We had a lot of familiar themes. We had like Eowyn's theme. We had obviously some of the Rohirrim themes. We even had like a Gondor theme when I think we saw Isengard for the first time, and there was some, obviously the Ring theme when we see a couple of things as well. So like we do get callbacks, but it's very subtle. I've had the chance to listen to the entire soundtrack through at least 1.5 times now at this point, and it's just, I'd say the soundtrack isn't hugely built on like now the music is taking over. It actually kind of lets the story do that, and it kind of takes a back seat a little bit, but it comes in triumphantly when it needs to, and I think it's done really, really well, and with a lot of care, and not like, oh, now I have access to all Peter Jackson or Howard Shore's themes, now I'm just going to play them everywhere. I think Stephen Gallagher does a really, really good job with the theme on this.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And the inclusion of Hera's theme, she has kind of her own theme that plays off of the Rohirrim theme.
It's brilliant.
It is. I think maybe a tad overplayed. I wish we got a couple more original pieces from this that was apart from Hera's theme. But Hera's theme is very pronounced. And it was really quite good. And the callbacks through the motifs and the themes. I mean, I think it was when they mentioned Gandalf too, we got just like a hint of something, and I was like, oh yeah, that was great. Yes. I would say it's up there. Would you guys put it right next to like the original trilogy music? I don't think it's quite there for me, but it's in my mind a little bit higher than other recent adaptations.
I think this is the kind of thing that you definitely, over time, you will get more and more, like you'll fall more and more in love with a score over time. It's very difficult to for example, there's the opening track on the soundtrack, which is called Overture. The first time I heard it, there are a few like different familiar themes that we're used to hearing. There's the Ring theme in there, and there's the Rohirrim theme. And the first time I heard them, I was kind of going, oh, okay, it's just, using the old themes. But I've listened to that one track now a lot of times, and it's just the way that he's blended them all together, and then also just turned it all into Hera's theme is just masterfully done, and it's really, really beautiful. And it took me a good few listens to really kind of appreciate that. So I'm looking forward to kind of spending time over the next, months and years as we go forward to kind of come back to that every now and again, just dip my toe in and kind of go, I'm going to listen to this piece. And I think I agree also that maybe it doesn't have all these different kind of characters' themes, and maybe it doesn't have as much. And of course, you can't live up to Howard Shore and what he did. It's just he's won Oscars for that, and so you can't be expected to do that.
Maybe part of it is the fact that we spend, right, this is a movie centered around Rohan, so you have to kind of stay within the same types of instruments, type of themes, versus in the Lord of the Rings, we can jump between elves and dwarves and men. And so we can get different, like whole different kind of orchestra, a whole different kind of band in there to really diversify that music. So since we spend so much time in Rohan, I guess that is probably unfair of me to say that it lacked diversity in a way, because it was diverse within the music of Rohan, you know?
Sure.
You can't expect the elven voices to come singing, you know?
Or the dwarves.
Why did we get any dwarven chanting going on there?
I do have a pretty bad cold at the moment, so I think I can, after this, I'm going to practice some of my...
There it is.
Class.
Dave, you mentioned it a moment ago as well. Just before we finish up, any Easter eggs that you wanted to comment on, Dave?
Well, I mentioned a few there. Like I'm trying to think. Obviously, we had Dom and Billy coming back as Shank and Rot. In case people don't know, the original actors for Merry and Pippin, they play the orcs in this. So I just wanted to throw in that line where I think it's Billy that says, "You could smell you from Mount Doom." I thought that was so funny. I'd say the two of them had a blast. They were probably only in there to record a couple of lines, but it was very, very.
You could hear both of them trying to hide their own accents as well. But I was like, as soon as I heard Dom, there's that Manchester accent coming through there.
And then Billy there with his Scottish accent. You're like,
But they did really well. I thought they did a fantastic job.
That was amazing. I had to laugh when I heard them.
Obviously, as well, the biggest Easter egg. Well, sorry, two of the biggest. Well, first of all, we've got Saruman coming in, so he's back, and he has this one line, which is "If you should ever be in need of assistance, my lord." And I thought that was really cool. I think they took that from like the Hobbit, archive. Archive of the Hobbit. When I think it was when they were shooting the Hobbit. Maybe it's
just so listeners are aware as well. That was an original Christopher Lee line that he said 10 years ago or however many years ago when they were shooting the Hobbit.
But the other thing, obviously, that people will recognize at the end is when they say "adventure beckons," and then there's the mention of Gandalf. He wants to question Hera about the rings that are being acquired by orcs and all that. I thought that was cool, really well done. Does this set up a sequel of some sort? Maybe not a sequel called War of the Rohirrim 2, but you know what I mean? Like, are we going to continue in the same vein, or will we see more of Hera in this same, I don't know, timeline? Anyways,
yeah. I mean, I think it definitely sets up this idea that we could get more anthology type of films like this. I have to wonder. So this. I think Weta posted that this was 183 years before the events of the Lord of the Rings, and I was like, that doesn't sound right to me. And I looked; it's not 183 years before the Lord of the Rings; it's before the Hobbit. But it's like 200 and something years before the Lord of the Rings. So I was really wondering: is Gandalf looking like? Does he know that rings are I mean, he's got his elven ring, but does he know that? You know, is he really looking for the One Ring at this point? I think so. I feel like that would be a strange thing to overlook, but this is what, 2780 of the Third Age, something along those lines. So I was curious about that.
Again, it kind of adds to that whole lore of like Peter Jackson's IP of maybe he wasn't, we see when Gandalf finds out about Bilbo's ring in The Hobbit, and then obviously like years and years later, he knows that that he's that he takes this ring from Bilbo and he goes and investigates it, and he's gone for 17 years or whatever. But like, maybe he actually just has a general interest in the collection of rings, or like looking at rings that could be magic, and that's why he's not so inquisitive about Frodo's or Bilbo's ring at first. He's just kind of like, interesting, but he's like, let me take this back to my little cabin in Minas Tirith here and have a look-see, and like, oh god, well, this is the no ring.
You got
I did like that. And I mean the mention of all the different geographical spots, right? The fords of the Eisen and all this. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yep, Gandalf's just he's doing quests and he's giving quests. So Hera, he's gonna put you to work, dude. Like, Gandalf's always got something for someone to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I also wanted to throw in, it's not really a Lord of the Rings Easter egg, but there was a moment during the battle at Edoras where Hama just like deflects a flaming arrow like so nonchalantly.
That was so awesome.
It wasn't really cool. Even like front of camera. It was just, I think the camera was facing Haleth dying. By the way, he gets brutally murdered with a neck. An arrow to the neck. But yeah, he just swats it off like a Jedi with a lightsaber.
It was sweet.
That was just like badass.
And it was cool. It wasn't like, oh, look at this stupid anime. It was like, I believe that. I believe
what kind of training are these Rohirrim doing? That's what I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was waiting to see the criticisms of like, oh, Hera did like a flip over Wolf, but I was like, I've seen an American football player do literally that. So this is like right on point, man.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to give a mention to Wolf as a child. Like, he was absolutely... Oh, we got a wolf there. Wolf as a child was absolutely hench. He was ripped. Like, did you guys notice that? I was like, who is this man?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, they were sparring with full-on metal swords.
Yeah, what was that about? So. That was mad.
Oh, that's true. She gives him the scar. Yeah.
But why were they using real swords?
Yeah, if one of them missed, like, that head would have.
They were swinging hard as well. Like, they were
crazy.
It wasn't just like when we were kids, Dave. We'd be like, playing with swords. They were proper, like, going for. They were trying to take each other's heads off.
Sharpened it all.
Yeah,
they were going for it.
To be fair, maybe the fact that once Hera gives him a scar, he immediately goes like, "Oh, quick, run home! Don't tell me, father," or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then, so maybe he stole them from his father's tent or whatever. Ooh, so that could be what happened.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, even though this movie wasn't maybe perfect in every single sense, right? It was really close to it. And honestly, it's in the realm of, it's close enough to perfect for me as just a lore fanboy to where I'm happy with it. Like, it might as well be a 12 out of 10. Perfect. I don't care. I love it.
Brilliant. Any final thoughts? Because we are going to have to wrap up, Dave. But
okay.
Yeah, but what are your final thoughts?
I was going to say that I have thought about this a lot over the last week, and I just feel like my biggest and kind of only gripe with the movie, but the main thing is just the anime and the animation. Mm-hmm. It's not for me. It's definitely for a lot of other people. Even if anime was my thing, I think it's still, from what I'm hearing of other people, it still doesn't hold up as well as a lot of animes do.
Yeah.
I think, though, if this was live action, which it isn't, but if it was, I think this could have been like a perfect 10. I think it could have been writing wise and just story and just the accuracy to the lore. Obviously, we get Hera, but like accuracy in general to the lore, sticking to all the same themes, values, characters, the way they interact, the way they die, all that kind of stuff. It's so good. So I'm really happy. I originally gave this a score of 7.5, but I would happily give it an 8.5, 9. Yeah. Maybe 8.5.
That's where I'm at. Yeah, 8.5.
Maybe 8 or 8.5 for me. It's the animation takes a lot from it, and I think I'd nearly rather I'd nearly listen to this again than watch it again. I think it's that good, but I just don't think the visuals are enough for me. But overall, I'm very happy. So yes.
Last word from you, Yoystan, on your overall thoughts.
I'm very happy with it, and I hope we get more. I'm afraid of the fact that the anime might drive away general audiences, so I'm trying to just tell everybody to go and see it. Right? It might not be perfect. It might not. You might have some issues with it, like any movie. But these are the kinds of Lord of the Rings projects that we want, and I kind of recognize that too about. Lord of the Rings Online, not the most popular MMO, but it's amazing and it tells the story very well. And I love that game. One of my favorite games ever. Right. And so it's like, if we want good Lord of the Rings adaptations, we got to like support the good ones as well as, kind of talk down the bad ones. Right. Can I
ask both of you, sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
How full or empty were the cinemas that you went to see this in? Because for me, when I went to see it, there weren't that many people in the screen.
Yeah.
And I saw our friend
mine-
Harry from Fellowship of Fans. I saw him post up a photo of him going to watch it again there for his second viewing, and he put up a little snapshot of him just like with the War of the Rohirrim tag up on screen, and you could see the cinema as well was pretty empty.
Pretty empty.
So, just
Mine
what was your
was
experience?
pretty empty. Yeah, but mine was like 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. So
Okay,
I'm not
yeah.
sure if yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously the premiere
Yeah.
in London, that was full, but my second
Sure.
viewing,
Yeah.
I did go. It was a matinee, so it was 2:30, I think, with the first showing on a Friday. Luckily, I didn't have to be working or doing any job related things, so I headed straight to the cinema, and I think it was myself and 4 others.
Yeah, because I went
Yeah.
at 9 or like 8 p.m. on a Friday, like Friday the release day, and it was not very full at all. So
Yeah.
Really?
it is kind of worrying. And so if you're listening to this and you're not sure if you want to go and see it, please do get out and support this movie, because if you we do want to try and show the studios that we are like there to put bums in seats and to support
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings projects. So yeah.
Yeah, speaking of, since we're just talking about this, I looked on X and I saw there's an account at Discussing Films, and they said War of the Rohirrim opened with 4.6 million domestically, which is pretty low from as far as I can tell about movies.
And the
so
opening weekend is pretty much where you make all your money.
it is. But I'm also curious if just the world we live in post virus, right? That maybe it will do better when it comes out, and we get an extended edition, hopefully. Crossing my fingers
Yeah.
for that next year.
Also, maybe with people being like myself included, a little bit apprehensive, a little bit like, don't want to get your hopes up about another adaptation. If we get more of these kind of relatively positive reviews out there, maybe we can encourage more people to go and see this film and to tune in. So
Exactly.
we need to try and be our own voice of encouragement for people out there.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
Well, I think like most movies depend on the marketing and the opening weekend for, like with their budgets, they spend a lot on marketing. I feel like this movie's marketing let them down. I think more movies in the modern day don't work well with word of mouth. But I think this movie actually will benefit with word of mouth. And that's obviously what we're doing here as well. Obviously, we don't work for Warner Brothers, but we want to get more of these types of movies. And Warner Brothers have the rights to the Lord of the Rings movies or anything that happens in the Lord of the Rings books. They have the rights to the movies. So, yes, we want more movies like this. Or, obviously, The Hunt for Gollum is going to be coming out. And I have more faith with The Hunt of Gollum because of all the people that are in charge of this movie.
Yeah.
So that's another good positive to take from this, because they can write a hell of a movie, and we knew that from the originals. But the likes of the new guys, Phoebe Gittins and Artie Papagiorgio, so they're going to be writing the Hunt for Gollum. So yeah, I'm all here for it.
Exciting times.
Let's go watch this movie, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I know they kind of had to fast track this a little bit just to keep the rights going at Warner Brothers, right?
Yeah,
but it's still amazing. It's still amazing, and again, they might work on it later too as well. So we can hope and we'll see.
Yeah.
But looking forward to the next projects, man. Always.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So that just about wraps up another episode here on the Council of Elrond. And as always, thank you all so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to get in touch and to let us know what you thought about this film, and if you have seen it or if you will be going to see it on the big screen. And as we said, please do try and go out and support it. And I mean, it's not that often we get to see a new Lord of the Rings based film in cinemas on the big screen with the score of Middle Earth, on those big speakers that we all love. So, it's an experience that we can't get all the time. So go out and do it. And yeah, please remember also that we are on YouTube now. So if you're listening, you can jump over there and you can see us do this in video format, and you'll be very welcome over there as well. But that's all from us this week. And once more, I'd like to give a huge thank you to Yoystan for chatting to us today. And of course, please go over, if you don't know already, which you definitely do, go over and check out his channel, The Men of the West. And I'm sure, there's so much content there that's really, really good. And as I mentioned before, this nice bite-sized videos that will really lead you into the Legendarium a little bit more. So thanks, Yoystan, for coming on again.
Thank you again for the kind words, and thank you guys for having me on. Johnny, Dave, it's been a pleasure. Hope to collab again in the future.
Yes,
sure.
absolutely.
100% we will do for sure. So thanks everyone again, and we will see you all next time on the Council of Elrond.